So till now, we saw how uh, artificial neural network in deep learning helped us to classify images, the MNIST dataset. But actually, there's problem with artificial neural networks also. So what is the problem is, imagine we considered 28 cross 28 pixel size image, and it created 784 neurons as in our input layer. So in real life, our images are mostly HD, something around 1000 pixels and more than that, or even satellite images are way beyond that. So those dimensions will go beyond 28 cross 28. So what does that mean is then your input layer will be 1000 cross 1000, which will go to millions of input neurons. And you will have to calculate those many number of weights. And similarly, in the next hidden layer, for those particular neurons also, you will have to again calculate weights. So it becomes like you're calculating millions of computations for those particular neurons. So one problem with this artificial neural network to classify images is the computation. If the images are HD and like if it is colored images, then the number of computations will exceed, and which is not feasible for your normal hardwares or even GPUs. It will take longer time to process. So that is one problem with ANN. The other problem is ANN does not recognize spatial features in your image. So imagine if this is my image, the MNIST data set that we were discussing, if 9 was written like this, your artificial neural network can easily split this into 28 cross 28 pixels and classify this. But if my image is somewhere like this is my image and my 9 is present here, then my artificial neural network will fail to recognize this image. So it does not consider your spatial features, because when you flatten this image into a single input vector, all these important features are present only here, and it becomes very difficult for your artificial neural network to classify this particular image. So that is why they came up with something called as convolutional neural network. So what it does is it preserves the spatial features. ANN flattens image data, which loses, it'll lose the spatial relationship between the pixels, like I described. But CNN keeps that thing. So how CNN works, I'll be explaining in the later slide. And fewer parameters. So if you use this convolutional neural network, like I told you, if it is a 1000 cross 1000 pixel image, you will have like millions of neurons. And those again, millions of neurons should be multiplied with those weights and again further propagated to another hidden layer. It becomes at one forward pass, you will be calculating so many operations. So this becomes very difficult. So that is why when you perform convolution, these number of neurons actually gets reduced without the loss of information from the image. So that we'll be seeing in detail how that will be done. So like I told you, the number of parameters will be reduced, and hence there will be faster computation, easy training, and less memory consumption. So if you have to differentiate between ANN and CNN, this is how your neural network looks like. So like in the previous session I described, your input layer will have all your input features, and then this is your hidden layers, and this is your output layer. But in convolution, what happens? When you're giving your input images, there's something called as filters, which is actually two-dimensional matrix. So if this is your image, you will have some filter which is of certain dimension. It will perform convolution over this entire image by performing matrix multiplication with the pixel values in the filter and the pixel values in the actual image. and it will generate something called as feature map, which will be having a different dimension based on certain formula, and this will be having all the information present in this original image. The important features will be captured, and this is called as feature map. So in convolution, what happens is, for example, you're trying to detect a face. So when you do convolution operation using a filter, the starting filters will try to detect features like eyes. So that features will be captured in your early stages of feature maps, and later the major big features like the face part later will be captured in your further feature maps. And there's something called as pooling. Those things I'll explain later. But at the end, when all this information is captured, you'll again flatten it, and the same thing will be repeated. Again, you will have one single dimension vector, but this will not be with the size of what your actual dimension will be, like 1000 cross 1000. This will be much less than that. And this, but it will still have all the information that was present in your actual images. And then you can easily perform your ANN, that is fully connected layer, where the same thing happens again. This part you can see. This FC is nothing but this part again. So in this type of neural network, you will not lose the spatial feature, even if your object to be detected is anywhere in the image, it will still be detected. That is one part, and your computational power will be less when it comes to CNN. The number of computations will be less. So this is how it looks. So you have an input variable and you have, so I was telling about filter, right? So that is called as kernel also. So when you try to multiply your kernels with this images, you will generate these feature maps, and you will pass these feature maps again through ReLU to introduce non-linearity. And again, pooling is actually what it does is it reduces the size of your this feature map. Now this is something around say it comes around 52 cross 52. Then pooling will be a much lesser dimension based on certain formula that I'll tell you how it works in the later slides. So there are different operations that you can do on this with this convolution neural network that depends on the values that are present in your kernel or the filter that you will be using to revolve above your input image. So based on the kernel values, you can either blur your image, sharpen your image, brighten, darken. So this is how your Instagram filters, everything work. Basically, there are filters. So these are the filter values which if you convolve over the input image, will generate that particular effect on that particular image. So sometimes to detect the objects in your image, you will have to identify the edges, you will have to identify, you have to sharpen the edges. So all these things depends on the kernel values or the filter values. So how this actually works, how the feature maps are generated, like I told you, is just matrix multiplication. Now if this is the kernel that I'm taking, which is how does it blur? So if this is my kernel values and this is my original image, it is a grayscale image, imagine. So it will try to multiply over this entire image. So this 3 cross 3 matrix will first be multiplied with this 3 cross 3 matrix in this entire image. So this is how it gets multiplied, and then the sum of that will be your feature map. So the same thing, then the filter will shift one step to the next this thing. So that is called as stride. So that also you can adjust. If you set stride as 2, then it can shift two places. that time your feature map size will be reduced, but it will still have all the information that you have in your images. So similarly, if it convolves over the entire image, so this is the formula. If you have an image of n cross n and the filter is f cross f, then the filter gets reduced to n minus f plus 1 and n minus f plus 1. This will be your output dimension. This is 3 cross 3 and this is 6 cross 6. So this will be 4 cross 4. So it means that your image size is reduced, right? Dimension is reduced, but you have not lost the information. So similarly, if it is like colored images, then you will run it over 3 different kernels. And then you will get a similar feature map with the same formula. So here, in case we are like detecting vertical edges and horizontal edges, then similarly this feature map has the vertical edge information and this has the horizontal edge. And these two feature maps we can later use to do the classification. This is the stride part. I told you if you want to like reduce your input feature even more, so you can shift the strides, increase it to 2, so it will take 2, it will jump by 2 columns. So there's one more thing called zero padding. Now imagine this is my image. Like I told you, if my 9 is written here, then in ideal artificial neural network, that information will not be processed. Here it will be processed, but still only one time the filter will go through towards it, and not much information will be taken from that. So if you want even the borders to be like considered equally, so what we do is we add a zero padding to our initial image dimension when you do not want to bother much about the dimension of your processing computation thing. So when you add the 0 and then you do convolution, it will also preserve this. So it will do multiple convolution over this layer. So this border values, everything will be considered equally. Otherwise, only one time this convolution would have happened and it would have gone down to the next thing. So if it is 0 padded, then the border information is also retained. So that is why we do 0 padding. And in that diagram, we saw that there was pool written. So what pooling does is when you don't want to like keep the bigger dimension of your input feature maps, we'll reduce it to a smaller dimension. But we don't want to lose any information with respect to that. So what we'll do is, if this is the feature map, max pooling is there, average pooling is there. If you do max pooling, you will take the maximum value of that particular matrix and you will keep it. So it means that the important feature in that particular cell is still retained, but it is also reducing your feature map size, which means lesser number of computations. So this is max pooling, which means maximum values from that particular matrix is retained. If you do average pooling, it will add all the 4 things and the average of that will be kept. So either both of the things you can use. Usually everyone uses max pooling. So this is how it looks, your feature maps and then your pooled feature maps. Then again, you will extract features from that, high level features. Then again, you will pool it. And like I told you, now this will again be flattened. It will become your one-dimensional input vector. And this again, the same artificial neural network and then classification. So what this does is basically this layer, the number of neurons will be reduced, but it will also keep the importance and the features that are present in all parts of the image. So that was about CNN. Now all the code that we have for demonstration is written in CNN only. There's one more thing that we'll be studying is, now till now we we used a single GPU, right? Now, what if we have 2 or more GPUs? Now, if my program can run well on one GPU, but I have 2 GPUs, if it can run on both GPUs, then obviously it will be running faster. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to divide my problem on 2 GPUs and get my problem solved faster. But not all the problems can be run on multiple GPUs. So for example, if I have a task and I'm giving it to one person, he will take T amount of time to complete that task. But if the task is small and I'm giving it to 10%, it will actually take longer time to complete the task, because again, they will have to communicate and then aggregate it and then get it to me. So not always distributing the task to different GPUs will help me. So you need to know if only the task is very complex, then distribute it. If it is small, then run it on a single GPU itself. So based on that, you need to distribute your task among GPUs. Make sure that the communication overhead between GPUs is not so much that your task is small and the communication itself is taking a longer time. So that will not optimize your performance. So deep learning frameworks for GPU acceleration. So till now we have been using PyTorch itself. TensorFlow also works good, but PyTorch is comparatively more efficient, and the user community is also very good for PyTorch. So I'd always suggest you to use PyTorch when it comes to distributed training, because their APIs work really well and scale well. So like I told you, distributed computing, it saves time, but you should also consider the size of your computation. If the task is too small, then don't go for distributed training. Increases the amount of compute. If it is computationally intensive, then go for it. And that is how your models will get trained faster. Fault tolerance and reliability, I'll explain later. So when do you need distributed training? Now I told you this model will be offloaded into GPU, right? So we had like one input layer, one hidden layer, and one output layer or something like that. But now we have models like ResNet and other big models where the number of layers is so much that it cannot actually fit into GPU. So in that case, what you have to do, or when you can't, this data set was very small. When you have a bigger data set, you can't put the entire data set and the model in a single GPU. Then what you will do is you will either do data parallelism or model parallelism. That we'll discuss in detail. So when the model may not fit into a single GPU, then the only option is to go for distributed training. When you're forced to use small batch size, because bigger batch size leads to out of memory error. I told you, if you try to load bigger data set, it will throw error that it is not sufficient, the memory is not sufficient. And sometimes both data and your model might fit, but it will take like very long time to train your models. When we have more resources, why not use it than take so much time to train it on single GPU? So that is when we need distributed training. So there are two types of scaling. One is vertical scaling. In this, you will upgrade the hardware itself, like your RAM size and your GPU, maybe the model only you will improve. This is one way. Or the other one is, like I told you, distributed training. When you have other resources, use that to distribute your code and work efficiently. So data parallelism. Now my model is small, this neural network ANN, but my data set is very big and I cannot load it on a single GPU. So what I'll do is, if I have multiple GPUs, I'll make a copy of my model in all the GPUs, but my data set is very big. So I'll chunk my data for different GPUs, and this will compute on one set of data, this will compute on one set of data, this will compute on one set of data, and whatever answers it will get, it will aggregate it. Like you saw morning, Bharat explained reduction operation. So it performs something called as all reduce. So basically here gradients are calculated, weights are calculated when training happens. All these weights are averaged and again it will send back to all GPUs and again training will start. So this is how distributed training works. So this comes when your data set is big and your model is small. Your model will be fitted in all GPU, but your data will be chunked differently. You can see here. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, this is your model. This is the copy of the same model in all GPUs, but your data is chunked. Here data 1 is missing, but data 2, data 3, data 4. It will all train on different data, but the values will later get aggregated and again it will train. Next one is model parallelism. So here is when your model itself is very big, then what you will do, you will chunk this model itself. And then your data is small, then you will copy this across all GPUs. And this model parallelism also works in a similar way. All your gradients will be aggregated at every iteration. So in distributed data parallel, you have different ways. In a single node, multiple GPU also you can execute. Single node, single GPU also you can execute. Multiple node, multiple GPU also you can execute. So everything has a different APIs written for it. So you will have to use accordingly. So this is the process explained. At the beginning of the training, the model weights are initialized on one node and sent to all the other nodes. So this detailed explanation is mentioned later. I'll go for it directly. So this is the model weights. This is what will be learned during the training, right? Initially, my gradient will be set to 0. And this is my weight. Initial weight is set to 0.1. So during training, what happens? My optimizer calculates the gradients. So now this gradient is set to 0. First, what will happen? This 0 is copied to all the GPUs present in my different nodes. When all the gradients are set to 0 and all the weights are also copied to all the nodes. Then what happens? Training starts and gradients are calculated on all different GPUs. So because everything is having different type of data, correct? The model is same, but the data was different for all GPUs. So their gradients will differ. So everyone will have different gradients in it. So you can see GPU 1 has calculated gradient as 0.8 and similarly different. So what happens? At the end of this iteration, so this part is called broadcast. It will basically broadcast your initial weights to everything. And here what happens is it does reduction operation, which means it averages everything. It will take the average of all the gradients. And then it sends it back to all the other GPUs. Now again the loop continues. It means that it is averaged for all the type of data present in all the GPUs. So this is called as broadcast and all reduce operation that happens in your distributed training. So this is how your training happens in multiple GPUs. Then again, when the gradients are all again sent back to all, then again the loop continues. Your gradient is set to 0. Your weights are being updated. You can see the value was 0.1. After the gradient was calculated, the weights got updated to 0.2. Now again the iteration goes on. So this is how it works. Now there is different way of like how node to node communication happens in distributed training. So this is like sort of an optimization thing that the communication libraries have done. So point to point, when you have to copy these gradients to every other nodes, it will take so much time. If it is taking 5 seconds to copy one gradient to another, to copy it to 7 other nodes, it will take almost 35 seconds. which is not ideal. So what NVIDIA's NCCL does is, NCCL is nothing but NVIDIA's collective communication library. It does this broadcast operation like this. So it assigns a unique ID value for all the nodes. Now imagine if this is having the value and it has to send it to one other node. It will send, and then later the thing is both the nodes already have the value. So what this node will do, it will also send the value to other nodes. So this kind of communication is all handled by NCCL, which is provided by NVIDIA. So NCCL works with your NVIDIA GPUs efficiently. It's also compatible for like other GPUs. It also works for your Rocky networks as well. So that is how all your data is copied efficiently. So this NCCL library helps you to synchronize your gradients faster compared to point-to-point communication. So similarly, like how your gradients are calculated, there it used to copy to every single nodes, but now once the gradients are calculated, these both all reduce is performed, and then these three all reduce is performed, and similarly last these two all reduce is performed. But the data of all the nodes is collected. So this is how all reduce works when you're calculating the gradients. So there is something, how do they communicate with each other? So when you're doing this distributed training, every nodes are assigned some unique IDs, which are called local ranks and global ranks. So if you have two nodes and there are two GPUs on each node, so if you consider the local rank, this GPU's local rank ID will be 0 and 1, and this GPU's local rank ID will be 0 and 1. But in global rank, the resource pool will be having 4 ranks. So using this resource pool only, your NCCL library will identify how many GPUs are present in that particular distributed training. So this rank unique identifiers are very important. So what happens during one node crashes? So you guys know training a model takes a very lot of time. Imagine you're training it for like 7 hours straight and then suddenly some node failure happens. Imagine you will have to start all over again. It is not the ideal way, right? So what we can also do is we can do something called as checkpointing. So what checkpointing does is, if you enable checkpointing, till 7 hours whatever the model is being trained, that will get saved to a stored common shared storage. Okay, and like those weights, everything will be saved in that particular file. So if you want to again restart it, even if the nodes get terminated, you can restart it from that particular point itself. So it's not like your 7 hours is gone and waste. So that is one plus point of training neural network with PyTorch. So it enables checkpointing. Also, you should make sure, so this rank IDs, ideally rank 0 will be saving all your checkpoints. And if you have 4 GPUs in your resource pool, like you're running your training on 4 GPUs, you do not have control on which node will be assigned rank 0. So make sure all the 4 GPUs has access to your storage, shared storage point. So this is simple PyTorch training. So data loader is there and then it loads it to your GPU. When the model receives the input, the optimizer will update the weights, and that is how your model is trained. So when it comes to multiple GPU, this is how it gets trained. There's a distributed sampler, data will get splitted, and then that will be sent to different GPUs, and the model will train it, and the optimizer will update the weights, calculate the gradients. And this gradient synchronization happens. Everything will communicate and it will average your gradients. And similarly, the loop continues. So this is how training happens in your PyTorch distributed training. Now again, the same thing repeats. Again, optimizer will play the role and updates until the model is completely trained. So these are some of the things that we got from distributed training. Is essential for scaling up large and complex models. When you have large and complex models, we use distributed training. And then there's something called as mixed precision. If your computations are taking way too much time to calculate, you can make your floating point to 16. Whenever there's like less computation required, your floating point will convert from floating point 32 to floating point 60. So your computations will happen faster. And that is called your mixed precision training. Checkpointing, like I told you, during failovers, checkpointing will help to save all your previous work done. And coming to containers, when it comes to distributed training, the only problem is to create an environment for running these applications. So if you're running on 4 nodes, imagine you have to log into 4 different nodes and create that environment, which is not feasible. So what we do is we use a container image where the environment is already created. We can, if you're running it on single node, you can just load that environment and run it on that particular container on a single node. You can also use this container image in your Slum and directly run it on how many ever nodes you want. So this we'll be seeing in our demonstration. So Docker does not enable multi-node, multi-GPU training. So that is why we'll be using en route. And also Docker, like I told you, due to system access issues, we usually do not encourage people using Docker. So en route is the best way to use your container technologies in HPC system. There's demonstration of that distributed training. Yeah. So now I'll be demonstrating that distributed training thing. Since you guys don't have access to multiple GPUs, it won't be possible to for you to do it on your collabs. Single GPU course you can still run, but multiple GPU, I'll show it here.
Hello. So I wanted to ask, you said if you are training your model for 7 hours, if then on node fails, that will save what you have done before.
Yeah.
So then how to resume from that point onwards?
So there it will be saved as a .pt file, like it's a checkpoint file. And PyTorch is written APIs so that you can resume from that particular point after it is trained. So it will take that .pt file as your input file, and from there again it can resume. Like if you have to resume the training, first it will ask if you have a checkpoint file or something like that. If it is present, you can give that as input, and immediately from that particular iteration, it will start training again. So everything is saved in that particular file.
So with the modified code, we can resume from that point again.
Yeah.
To modify the code or to...
No, you don't have to modify the code. The weight, see, when you're training a model, only the weights will be calculated, right? So that weights that are calculated till 7 hours, everything will be updated in that particular file. So when you reload that thing, you would have mentioned run it for 10 epochs, right? Maybe it would have executed for 7 epochs. So till 7 epochs, what your weight values were, the best weight values, that will be stored in that checkpoint file. So once it resumes it, it will start from epoch number 8. It will not start from epoch 0, which means that you saved a lot of like not saved a lot of time. You did not lose all the training that was happened. Yeah.
I was curious how sensitive CNN is to say there is some feature that I've trained on so there are a lot of images and there is a feature at the center of the image that I've trained on. And after training, if I give a image of having this feature shifted, how sensitive will it be to detect these features? And if say the sizes have also changed?
Yeah, that is what I was telling. So your feature map, when it does convolution over the entire image, at some point it would have reached exactly mapped over that particular feature. So it means it would have extracted that information and then it would have come to that feed-forward neural network.
Yes.
So
Will it be sensitive to the if the sizes are changing because the kernels would have changed?
yes, it is not that sensitive compared to your ANN. So ANN does not perform well when it is like the features are bad and like small or like somewhere dislocated from the image. But CNN will be able to capture all these features. So that feature maps depends on like your filter size. Those things also vary a lot, and then everything is hyperparameter. You'll have to like try around with different thing, and the best value, like I told you, the minimum error part. So that will be your best possible weights or feature values when you predict that thing.
And what if there is only a fraction of the feature seen? Like if I provide a fraction of the feature, say instead of the full face, I just give it a masked face. How sensitive will that be?
So that you will have to check with the neural network itself. So you cannot predict. Maybe see, the thing is it'll identify those huge. It'll maybe if you have to identify eyes or something from the image, it might. But if you are trying to identify the entire face, so like I told you, your initial feature maps will identify smaller features, and your later features can identify features like the entire face, which means your eyes knows everything. So here your features might get recognized, but here the face might not get detected because your full face is not present. So that might be the case. Yes. So that option is also available for you. You can set the value by yourself, like save the checkpoints after how many iterations. So that option is also it's user defined.
Okay, so you told after running one loop of training, so all the weights from distributed GPUs will get average and then it will be
Yes.
shared among the GPUs.
Yes.
So will all the GPUs go back to the same average you get, or will different GPUs compute it in a very different way, like not just averaging it, but some other regression do they follow?
No, it'll actually average because this. So one GPU is training on a different set of data and the other GPU is training on a different set of data. So you cannot expect the gradients or the gradients to be same. That will be calculated. But you need to consider that entire data set as a whole to train that model. So you definitely need to average it. So it will get averaged and then it will get again broadcast back and then again the training gets completed. So that is when your all four GPUs would have trained on that entire particular data set thoroughly.
Okay, so like averaging in the sense, like how does it average?
It's just basic averaging. Sum divide by 4. Like if it's 4 GPUs, add the gradients of all and divide it by 4. You'll get the average gradient. It'll be sent back again to all the GPUs.
Okay, thanks.
So this is the same MNIST data set that we tried doing classification using artificial neural networks. Now this is the same code, but it is using your convolutional neural networks. So I'll not explain in detail. You guys can go through because you have access to the Git repository. So this code is written with convolutional neural network. And similarly, the neural network is defined. And then you have all these linear layers. And at last you have the output layer, which is set to 10. Now this is, you'll be considering all the feature maps. And then these dropout layers, I told you, like this dropout layers also introduces non-linearity, how ReLU will turn off the neurons. Like if there is negative values, it will set it to 0. What this dropout layer does, it will turn off few of the neurons in your particular neural network. So that also adds on to your accuracy of the model. And then finally, you have the final fully connected neural network layer, which is having only 128 neurons, and it comes down to 10 output neurons. So you can like go through the layers later, but now I'll just explain how it has been offloaded to GPU. So this is the same thing. Initial optimizer, the gradients are set to 0. And then later we'll define a loss function, and then we'll define an optimizer. After back propagation, the optimizer will calculate the gradients and update the weights. So this is the train function, and this is the test function where you will calculate the accuracy and throughput, like how many images were processed at per second. Those kind of implementation is present in that. And then you have a main function where you can pass some command line arguments like batch size or learning rate. Like I told you, how fast your weight should be changed, that depends on learning rate. And there's many other flags that you can use. This is the dataset download part. Data loader, like I told you. It will handle all the loading of data and offloading it to your GPU. And here you're sending your model itself to the device. And then your optimizer is updating your model parameters. And then here there's an extra parameter called scheduler. This will modify your learning rate to change your learning rate to faster attain your global minima, like the minimum of the loss function. And here you will, based on the number of epochs you will give, so many times the entire data set will be traversed. So this is how your code looks like. Now running it on single GPU. So there are two ways you can run your codes on cluster. One is called interactive way. So like usually before you saw Akash wrote a Slum script, and then he submitted it to the Slum telling, I need this GPU, and whenever it's available, just make sure you run that code for me and give me the output and log. But now if I have to like directly run it on that particular GPU, I can do that also. So for that, I have to allocate a node for myself, a GPU node. So I'm telling SLOC, allocate one node with one GPU, since this is a single GPU training, and the partition is GPU and time I need for 1 hour. And I've got a reservation done telling that please do not give these GPUs to anyone else. So I've requested the system admin and I've got the reservation done. So these nodes will not be given to any other users. So when I give this SLOC command, it said that granted job allocation. So if I do sq-me, it means I'm checking what all nodes are allocated to me. So for my user, 26 seconds ago, one GPU got assigned to me. So this is the GPU node that was assigned to me. If I SSH to this, I can directly go inside that GPU. See, I was in the login node. Now I'll be landing inside my GPU node where I can directly run my code. So you can see I was in login node 5 here. Now I'm in RSGPU 007. So you here if I do Python and download mns.py, my dataset will get downloaded as data folder. So that I've already done. So I've created an environment here using Conda. So that steps is mentioned here. If you want to create it on your cluster, then you will have to follow these steps. So you will be able to create that environment. So that environment is active now. So what I'll do, my data is ready and this is my code. So I'll just run my code. So here if you see it, if this is set to true, when this is set to true, it will get downloaded as ./data. That is how that folder was created there. So here you can see the execution has started. It means my process, like my task was offloaded to the GPU. Here it is using little memory and my process ID is spawned here, PID. So it means that my task is offloaded to GPU and it is executing. Since it's not, MNIST is a very small data set, it doesn't take much of the computation power and memory. But if you're running image classification models like ResNet, its data set is having around 180,000 images. So that time when you increase the batch size, it will take up the entire 80 GB. So, and your utilization also reaches up to 100%. So it is that compute intensive. So this will take time and then again it will start training your model, loss will get calculated and your throughput will get printed. So this is how you run it on single GPU. So for multiple GPU, what you have to do is you have to make very less change. You just have to pass your model to this data parallel. So what it does is in a single node, if you have two GPUs, what do I mean by single node multiple GPU is, usually my GPU, in my single node, there are two GPU cards. So if I run only with normal GPU execution, it will be offloaded to one single GPU. But when I use DP, distributed data parallel, no, only data parallel when I use, it will use multiple GPUs. So when I have to use two different nodes and four different GPUs, there is an interconnect in between. That time I'll use something called as distributed data parallel. That when you are trying to run it within a single node, you have to use data parallel API And when you're trying to run it on two different nodes, you will have to use DDP. So here you can see it is just within the same node. So you will have to pass your model to data parallel and it will handle all the other changes. Similarly, there's a Slum script for that. So here the training is started. So the number of epochs was set to 15, I guess. So we'll just terminate it. So that is how your training happens on one single GPU. So this is multiple GPU. The same command, now there are no process running because I killed that process. If I do Python and run this code, so this code has that data parallel included in it, which means that it will be able to run the same model on two different GPUs. There was only minimal change that you just pass the model to this data parallel code. You can see the code, everything remains the same. The place where you're passing the model, you will have to pass it to the data parallel module. Here. And then you can train it on. See, you can see that it is spawned on both the GPUs. It's just one line of change that you made and it could run on multiple GPUs. So this is how you make use of multiple GPUs to train your deep learning model. So it is a single task, that's why my process ID is same, even though it's running on two different GPUs. So this is working, so now I'll show distributed data parallel, which will run on multiple GPU, multiple node. So since I have only two nodes reserved, I'll come out of that node also. So I have no nodes reserved, allocated for me as of now. So I have two nodes for myself. So this is the Slum script that I'll be using to run it on multiple node, multiple GPU. So here there are few more changes. Like I told you, data parallel for single node, multiple GPU. For multi-node, multiple GPU, you'll be using distributed data parallel. The model, everything remains same. But one thing, like I told you, when there is interconnect involved in between the nodes, I told you there's something called as NVIDIA's collective communication library, which coordinates all the process groups, like ranks and nodes, right? So that resource process group you have to initiate in your distributed data parallel, this line. And there is also a function defined to clean up this process. Remaining train and test function remains the same. And here this printing of logs, only if the rank is 0, that particular node will print the logs for me. And rest everything remains same. So here is if the rank is 0, I'm telling to save the model. This is something called as checkpointing. So if for 10 epochs it's trained, everything would have been saved here. So when you're trying to resume it, it'll get loaded from here. So for this, we have a Slum script written. So in distributed data parallel, what happens? There is master and slave communication happens. There'll be one head node which will coordinate all the communication and other thing. So one node will be considered as the master node. So that one's IP address will be extracted and one port will be considered for communication. That port ID you will have to mention. World size is the total number of GPUs that will be present in that particular communication group. If you have two GPUs on each node and you're using two nodes, four will be your world size. And ranks will be allocated by Slum itself. Similarly, OMP num threads, how many CPU threads you want to use for a single task, that also can be defined. And later using torch run and srun, you can execute your .py file. And here for torch run, this is called a rendezvous environment variable. So this C10D will actually coordinate all the communication process. So you will have to mention this as well. So for this, I've submitted batch script. So it already started executing. So one of the GPU node it considered as the master node and it extracted its IP. And then I've given a master port where the communication happens. Since there are two nodes that I'm using and two GPUs are there in two nodes, so total world size will be 4. And rank 0 is printing my logs, so rank 0 is printed. And now training happens. This is how so once the execution starts, you can see that the process IDs will get spawned here. So if this is my node 007, so if I log into 008 also, both the GPUs will be running. So per GPU batch size, global batch size. So every GPU should take 32 batch size of images and then it will process. And this continues. And similarly, last thing is how to run it with container. So en route, like I told you, en route is compatible with Docker images. So if you check this README file, everything is written. So this is the Docker image for PyTorch, this version. So I don't have to create a Miniconda environment or anything. I just have to run this command. So this execution is started. So we'll leave that. It's completed also. So when I run this command, en route import Docker this image, a squash file will get downloaded. This is the environment which has this PyTorch environment in it. So instead of creating Conda environment, I can directly use this particular squash file and run it in my Slum script. So I'll have to give that as -- container image, that particular squash file. And then I'll have to mount my entire, wherever my code is present, that I'll have to mount for my container mounts. And then whatever command I should execute inside that will be executed. If I have to run it interactively, I can do that also. since I'm already in the GPU node, so I've allocated one GPU for myself. I've done this already. This creates a container itself. So what it does is it uses the squash file and it creates a container where I can go inside that container and run my executions. So it will not affect any of my other environment variables that is present in my user space. It creates a container, then I can start the container and I can just navigate to that particular directory and run the file. So that container is created. What do since I'm running it on login node, so I got this error. So what I should do is so since there was no GPU, I got this error telling that the command not found NVIDIA container CLI. Sorry, it's here. So this container was already present in this GPU. When I did enroute start and that particular container name, now I'm inside the container. So whatever changes I make here, my OS is also different. This is not the OS that my host node is having. So now what I'll do is I'll navigate it to that particular since I mounted home. So here it's Ubuntu. If you can see, it will have the same OS what your Docker image will be having. So this, I'm actually inside the container and this is how I run inside the container. And similarly through Slum also you can do the same thing like I explained. You will pass the squash file itself and then you will give the container name whatever you built and then the command that you will have to execute. So here it's running inside the container and similarly through Slum also you can submit. It will run on different GPUs. That's all from my side.
Any quick questions? Okay. Fine. So it's not that maybe they can try it out since you have already provided all the Jupyter notebook. They can work on it and then